it didn't even hit me what I had done. Like, I didn't even feel that accomplished because honestly, coming into it, it was like I had trained for this and finishing the race was what I expected to do. So this is definitely an example of your happiness equals reality minus your expectations. But even like me finishing, I placed in the top 10 out of almost 50 people. It was my first race. So that was pretty unbelievable to be honest. But even then, like, it didn't really hit me. This is modern day Hippie. We are your homies who've done nearly every drug under the sun. Over 600 psychedelic trips and nearly every kind of bender you can possibly imagine have armed us with a universe of knowledge. I'm Yuki, and with my co-host Reggie, we talk about how we do drugs in a responsible, safe, and fun way to improve our lives. Before we dive in, and so we don't get sued, a quick legal disclaimer.
This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. Our goal is to educate and inform others about the realities of substance use in an engaging and entertaining format. We share these experiences so you can learn from them without trying them yourself. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to attempt to recreate anything found in this episode or in any of our other content. We are not confessing to any acts stated in this podcast. The content in this episode should not be treated as factual or real in any way.
With that, we welcome you through our portal and hope you enjoy the show. What's up, hippies? Hope you're having a vibey day so far. On today's episode, I wanted to talk about a personal accomplishment that I had, and B, how it relates to drugs, the world of drugs, my experience with drugs. And I thought this would be an interesting thing to share with you guys today and something you might not have heard before. So the accomplishment I'm referring to was that about 2 weeks ago, I ran my first ever ultramarathon. So I ran a double marathon, which was almost 53 miles all in one go. It took me like 12 to 13 hours to do, which is insane. And there's a couple of crazy things about this. Number one is the fact that I have not been a runner for most of my life. I literally got into running about a year ago. I've talked about this on the podcast sparingly in the past, but I like despised running my entire life. And then something clicked about a year ago. I got into it and I haven't even run a real marathon. I was supposed to, but I had to cancel it because I had a conflict. And however, I did run my own like self-paced marathon about 5 months for my ultra. And now here I am a year into my running journey and I completed a freaking 53-mile race, which is bonkers. And so I'm telling you guys this to give you some context first off. And then I will dive into kind of the 5 high-level things that I feel like I learned about drugs, my experience with drugs from this ultramarathon. The final tidbit I want to share before we hop into the 5 things was the fact that not only did I run this freaking insane ultramarathon, which happened to be on a Saturday, but the night before on a Friday night, one of my favorite DJs who I've been dying to see for quite a long time happened to be in my city. And I knew months prior, literally like when I bought the tickets, the day they went on sale for this DJ, that it would be the night before the ultra. And at the time of buying the tickets, I was like, oh, I'll register for the ultra, I'll buy the tickets. And then when I get closer, I'll, maybe look to sell my tickets. And as the date got closer, I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to go for the freaking back-to-back rave 2 ultra marathon doubleheader. And sure enough, Friday night, I packed up my car with quite a lot of stuff, a lot of supplies, provisions that I would need for my ultra marathon. I drove to the rave venue. I danced my ass off from midnight to around 2:30 a.m. when the show was over. I got in my car and I drove straight to the site of the ultra marathon, which was about an hour and a half away, basically in the middle of nowhere, like way outside of my city. I show up there, I get there around 4 a.m. and I literally sleep in my car for an hour from about 4 to 5 a.m. I wake up to my alarm. I scarf down some food because definitely needed to get some early nutrition in before the run. I stretch and then right at 6 a.m., I start running. And I freaking keep running for over 12 hours. And man, the terrain this race was on was rough. Like not only was it hilly, I think I got like 6,000 to 7,000 feet of total elevation gain over the course of the race. But it was also just a really rough trail. It was rocky. There were times where it's like, yeah, you could kind of jog, but you had to be really careful because otherwise you would roll your ankle. And There were like pebbles, there were boulders, there were these big rock faces, and it was gnarly. Like I definitely trained for this ultra, but I didn't train enough on trails to feel comfortable. And somehow I finished it. Honestly, the last like 10 miles were freaking harrowing, but I finished the race. And I'm proud of myself for that one. I honestly have no idea if I'll be doing another one. I probably will, but we'll see what my next goal will be because, damn, I am still recovering. I am exhausted. I could not walk for a few days after that. But with that said, let's now dive into the 5 things that I learned about drugs from running my ultramarathon. Number 1 is that I really do believe that it's possible to feel the whole array of human emotions while being perfectly sober. However, I do really credit drugs and specifically psychedelics, but honestly, drugs across the board for giving me the perspective and almost like the fast forward or like the cheat code to experiencing some of these feelings and these emotions, such that when I actually got around to feeling these things in a totally sober state, I was able to identify and appreciate them. Because I think without having drugs, I wouldn't have had that basis for understanding like, oh, hey, this feeling that I'm getting from this physical activity or this meditation or whatever is something that I can actually compare to taking a truly mind altering substance. So a few examples of how I would characterize this. So first off is this experience of the runner's high. And this is something that I talked about on an episode a couple months ago. And just the fact that when you're running and your body kind of gets in the mode of being this machine whose job it is just to just keep going, and you're consuming really just carbs, which is the fuel for your engine, for your machine that it needs to keep going. When you get in that mode, like your body really goes on autopilot and it really changes the way that you experience the world. The movement aspect becomes basically subconscious. You're doing it on autopilot. And then even at the mental scale, for example, the way that like time flowed for me during this ultra marathon completely changed. I mean, I was on my feet and running for damn near 13 hours and it just kind of flew by. Like parts of it I just zoned out on. But at the same time, I don't know if zoned out is the right word because like I mentioned, that terrain was so rough and rocky that I had to be dialed in on every step. Like one wrong step, I'm rolling my ankle and my race is over. But it was like time was just flying by. And honestly, the best way I kept track of this was because about every 35 to 40 minutes, I had to take one of these like energy gels, which is literally just like syrup, like it's sugary syrup. And because that sugar is the carbs that you need. And so I was keeping track of my time because every mile, like Strava was telling me like, hey, you just finished mile 20. Your last mile was this fast. Here's your total time. And so I was keeping track of my time with that. And I was like, oh, okay, in 35 minutes from now, I need to take another gel. And man, these 35 to 40-minute blocks would just fly by. And it's funny because as the race went on, I dreaded eating these gels more and more. Cause like, dude, by the end, I was on like, in the range of having eaten like 16 to 18 gels. And even though there's different flavors, I just got tired of just chewing down this freaking sugary syrup. And I actually had so much of it that my teeth were getting so sugar sensitive. Like, when you eat so much candy that your teeth kind of start hurting and aching. Oh, my teeth were hurting so much to the point where I was like, I really don't want to eat another one of these gels. And when I would put one back, I would try to almost like put it straight into my throat past my teeth so it wouldn't cause me as much discomfort. Granted, it was still quite painful. But like towards the end of the race, when I was not looking for those gels, like 35 to 40 minutes would just fly the fuck by. So that was impressive. And I definitely got spurts of runner's high during this race. But I would say runner's high for me has happened at a little bit like higher paces. In this race, I was really trying to take it easy throughout because, I mean, you're running 53 miles. You don't want to be sprinting that. Kind of an offshoot of that is the fact that throughout the race, I didn't really have a plan about whether I was going to listen to music or run in silence or like what I was going to listen to. I was just like, I gave myself some options. And I kind of just went with the vibes. And so I would say I spent about half the race listening to music, half not. But when I got down to the last 4 to 5 miles of this race, when I was really, really struggling, there's this one song that my friends and I have just been geeking on that just something about that song just amps me the fuck up. And I'm not going to tell you guys what the song is just yet. If you want to know, leave a comment below and I will share with you. Hey hippies, we hope you're enjoying the show so far. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and are having a good time, you need to come over to YouTube and subscribe to the Modern Day Hippie YouTube channel. We publish exclusive video content, and I promise you the experience is richer and more interesting. So if you're getting any value at all, stop what you're doing, open up the YouTube app, and subscribe at Modern Day Hippie. If you're watching this on YouTube and aren't subscribed yet, what are you doing? Go press subscribe. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the show. But I knew the song, like I know how it makes me feel. I know how much it amps me up because I've used it in some of my training runs. And like after 10 miles of a training run, I'll rip this for the last mile and it'll just absolutely send me. Like I'll sprint last mile easily on this song. And so I didn't want to like almost waste the energy that the song would give me. So I literally saved it until the last 3 or 4 miles of the race. And then I put it on repeat. And man, I went from doing like 14 to 15-minute mile paces for like the last 13 miles to those last 3 miles. I think I was clocking in like 12-minute miles. It was pretty nuts and I really gave it my all. And it's like literally it was just a song that made me feel this way. Like it literally made me feel like I was high, and that was incredible. You know, just the relationship I've created with this song and that my friend group has with the song, like it makes us just feel a certain type of way. And that legitimately feels like a drug, which is incredible. I will also take this opportunity to clarify that there were absolutely no drugs involved in my running this ultramarathon at all. Funny enough, a lot of my friends who know me, that is one of the first questions that they ask because they know I enjoy doing drugs. And I very briefly considered it. I'm like, oh, what if I just take like half a tab of acid just for the vibes while I'm running? And honestly, I ended up not doing that. And that was a pretty easy decision, to be honest, because it's like, I didn't want it to take me out of the element of like really having to be focused on this race. Like, again, I had to be dialed in on being aware of how my body is feeling, dialed into like where I'm stepping and how I'm running. And then I was also kind of worried that taking a drug during the race would just be like cheating. Like, I feel like if I did that, I wouldn't be able to like fully give myself 100% credit for this accomplishment that I had made. So I was glad that I just kind of did it on my own. And then the final point about going back to the, we can really feel the whole array of human emotions while sober just through, like physical experiences, or if we can learn to harness our minds in the right way. The other way I felt this and have also shared on the podcast in past episodes is whenever I've done like guided Wim Hof breath work, which is a very specific form of kind of like aggressive, purposeful breathing, it really, it makes my body start vibrating. Like it gives my body this energy that is very akin to kind of the body buzz that I've gotten from MDMA or from LSD. And that's just like another example of something that's, completely just like health related, not drug related at all, that has really made me feel like I'm on substances. And so, there's some of these modalities, whether it's physical activity like exercise or things like yoga, breathwork, meditation, that have really given me these unique experiences. And honestly, if you're listening to this, you probably have some interest in drugs, you probably enjoy drugs. Honestly, try some of these other approaches. Like they don't sound as sexy. They're definitely not as easy. Like they take some more effort. You're not just consuming something, but man, the rewards are really worth it, I would say. The second thing that I learned about drugs from running my ultramarathon was that even quote unquote healthier drugs, or what I consider as healthier drugs, definitely do take a toll on your body, and especially in the arena of sleep. So as you guys probably know by this point, like my tier list of drugs, like for me, the drugs I hate the most that I don't ever do are alcohol and cocaine. Those just don't do it for me. I don't have fun. They don't make me feel good. And yeah, like physically, they make me feel the shittiest. Like a day after heavy drinking or a day after heavy cocaine use, I would feel way shittier than after, a day or a night of doing psychedelics or even doing ketamine, things which are still, pretty serious drugs, but really I feel like they have less of a profound lasting impact on me. And with that said, it's like even with something like a psychedelic like mushrooms, yes, I do genuinely believe it is healthier, it is safer, it is better for you, both mentally, and it's less harmful for you physically. But any substance really affects your quality of sleep. And the way that I realized this was because for 3 weeks leading up to my ultra, I was stone cold sober. And so actually 3 weeks before my ultra, I happened to be at this big camping music festival where that was definitely my last like pretty serious like bender that I was on. And I knew that for the 3 weeks after that, between the music festival and the ultra, I would be doing no drugs. And dude, I have to freaking tell you, like by the end of that 3 weeks of being sober, I felt so well rested. I felt so physically healthy and fit. And not just because I'd been training my ass off for running. Like, man, my sleep schedule was on point. I was going to bed pretty early. I was falling asleep quickly. I was waking up feeling incredibly refreshed. And man, that was fantastic. And I had a feeling that after the race and when I would go on my next kind of drug experience, that I would lose some of that feeling of freshness and feeling good. And I was proven completely right. So like this past weekend was the first weekend after the ultra. And I went to this crazy mansion party that my friend put on. It was a great freaking time. There were literally like pole dancers and strippers just like performing outside on this pool that overlooked this beautiful vista. Obviously, there were plenty of drugs involved, and we were up all night, just honestly having a very wholesome time, very good time, but just listening to music, DJing, talking, cuddle puddling. Like it was beautiful. Like it was honestly a fantastic night. And it was like the perfect re-entry into me, like putting drugs back into the mix for myself. But man, coming off this weekend, like I am still feeling tired, exhausted, and granted, part of it is because Saturday night I did not sleep at all. And so Sunday it was like took a recovery nap and then try to get a lot of sleep Sunday night. But like I have not been sleeping well this week. And I think it's really because my body, is still kind of breaking down and getting through the drug experience, and just contrasting how I felt right before this weekend. So coming off my ultra and taking really good care of myself, with how I feel now, which is I feel like, exhaustion wise, like a pretty serious low. And then before this music festival, I would say every weekend I was doing like a little bit of something. Like I wouldn't describe it as a bender, but I do some ketamine here, some shrooms. And I think even those things were at some subliminal level affecting my sleep and making it so like I feel fairly rested, but I'd be at like 80 to 90%. And so honestly, now I have a much deeper appreciation for these like long breaks from drugs. Like I will look forward to those even more deeply than I already have. Like they very much have a purpose and serve me well. And so, yeah, like if you guys haven't taken an intentional break from drugs, like just do it for a couple of weeks. I'd say a month is a good amount of time and you will feel the difference. I am telling you, you will feel fantastic. Your sleep quality will go through the roof. I really think you'll feel just more rested, more alive and awakened. And it's a beautiful feeling. You're at the club and the music is thumping, but you've got nothing left in the tank. So what do? Sniff some cacao. Yup, you heard that right. Sniff some cacao. It's the hottest new trend in the club and party scene. One bum-sized sniff of raw chocolatey powder contains the caffeine equivalent to a half cup of coffee, and boom, it hits instantly. And the best part is you can now sniff cacao anytime, anywhere. Right out in the open, in front of the DJ booth or the stage, even at the VIP table with your friends. Now, how does that happen without drawing unwanted attention? Snogo's spring-loaded bump straws make it possible. These classy, triple mirror polished bump straws are the safest, most discreet way to enjoy sniffing cacao. In fact, you've most likely already seen people wearing Snogo's bump straws as pendants around their necks without even knowing it. Discover why sniffing cacao using Snogo bump straws is being called the biggest revolution in partying since the invention of rock and roll. Jump on over to snogostraws.com to learn more. That's SNOGOSTRAWS.com and use discount code MDH15 at checkout for 15% off your entire order. That brings me to my third learning, which is that the longer break you take from doing any drugs, the better it'll be and the more fun you will have when you come back to them. Now, like on one hand, this is like a pretty logical thing. So, you let your tolerance go down for all these substances. And like I mentioned, you have a period of just truly giving your body the opportunity to rest and your brain as well. But I think even more deeply than that, like disconnecting yourself from anything, really giving yourself space from anything, whether it's a hobby activity, whether it's a relationship, whether it's drugs, that space really gives your brain a pleasant reset. And when you come back to whatever that thing may be, you can approach it with a new, fresh perspective because that time that you've taken to have a break from whatever it is you're taking a break from, that just gives you room to process that thing in a different way. And so again, on this break that I had from drugs leading up to my ultra, like I really got to focus on my physical health. I got to focus on my sleep and really think deeply about various things in my life, not just my relationship with drugs, but with other people and some hobbies and things that are important to me. And it's like coming back to those things and coming back to drugs. Like I have a deeper appreciation for it now than I ever have before. And thinking back on past breaks that I've taken, I have really felt similarly. And so I think by that logic and by that theme, I'm very much going to keep taking like strategic breaks from substances, like full out, like stone cold sober for at least a period of a couple weeks at a time, to just really give myself a new lens through which to appreciate those experiences. Because no matter how amazing something is, no matter how wonderful it is, no matter how happy it makes you, if you overdo it, it will lose its shine, it will lose its sparkle, and it just becomes not as fun, right? And especially with some of my drugs where you do need to be, careful and cognizant and aware that you're doing it in a responsible way. Giving yourself that break and then coming back to it with new eyes is honestly an incredibly rewarding experience. That leads me pretty nicely into learning number 4, which is the ability for psychedelics to allow you to unlock the processing of old emotions. Now, this is something that I think at a high level is like pretty common knowledge. Like you take psychedelics and it can really let you relive and re-experience past memories and just experiences that you've had. But man, I felt this vigorously this past weekend on, my first bender since my ultramarathon. And this was especially profound coming off of the third learning, which is drugs are better after you take a break from them. Because this weekend I had a very profound trip, primarily off of a DMT, but it's like in the background, I also had some shrooms and then was also kind of adding to the experience with some strategic ketamine and 2C, kitchen sink 2C or Colombian 2C usage. But man, that DMT trip just enabled me to process some emotions that I didn't even know were there. So it's like, on one hand, it's definitely like just older emotions that I've had lingering for years. I mean, things about like my family and my relationships. But what really stuck out to me the most was the emotions that it made me process about my ultramarathon. Because what was really ironic about the ultramarathon was that when I finished the race, I expected to feel some form of elation, some form of joy. And the reason I expected this was because the one longer distance I had run before was, like I mentioned, about 5 months prior, I ran like just a solo self-paced marathon. And man, coming off of the end of that marathon, like I felt alive. I was buzzing. I was like excited. I was really tired. Like at the time, that was the hardest physical thing I'd ever done, but I was like buzzing. I felt like I had gotten so much out of that experience in the moment. And so coming up on the ultra, when I finished, when I crossed the finish line after almost 53 freaking miles, it really felt underwhelming. It's like I finished with a whimper. And even though the last few miles I was booking it to this song that gave me energy, man, when I got to the finish line, I think I was just so exhausted. Like I just crumpled to the ground. I rested for like 15, 20 minutes. And then honestly, like the honest thought in my head was, all right, that was just another day in my life. I want to go home. I just want to lay down and take a bath and maybe try to get some food down and hopefully not throw it up. And I think that is definitely commentary on just how exhausted. Like it didn't even hit me what I had done. Like I didn't even feel that accomplished because honestly, coming into it, it was like I had trained for this and finishing the race was what I expected to do. So this is definitely an example of your happiness equals reality minus your expectations. But even like me finishing, I placed in the top 10 out of almost 50 people. It was my first race. So that was pretty unbelievable to be honest. But even then, like it didn't really hit me. And so it really took this DMT trip a week after my ultra to surface some of those emotions. I mean, coming off this DMT trip, at some point, I just kind of started sobbing because I was having these realizations of like, damn, I really gave it my all. Like I was sobbing with joy for giving my all. And I was almost also sobbing with some sorrow because I was like, damn, I really broke myself on this race. And it's like, honestly, my body's been fucked since the race. Like I get random cramps just while I'm sitting down. Like the blisters have healed, but obviously the muscles are still going through some stuff and just all these emotions and this like processing that I had a feeling would come with time. I thought it might take a couple of weeks, but it all just came rushing to me through this DMT trip. And like these aren't emotions that were like, oh, like stress or anxiety about a relationship or like a fight I was having or dissatisfaction in my life. Like these were just latent things that I'm like, those emotions were laying somewhere in my mind or my body about, just this physical feat I had accomplished. And this psychedelic trip really brought them out for me in a way that I didn't think would happen. Like my assumption was that a couple weeks after the ultra, I would kind of return to a baseline and then I'd be able to decide like, oh, do I want to do another race like this or not? Like, who knows? And I don't think it's a fair guess for me to make until it's been like a solid month after the race to see how do I actually feel. Because man, the first few days coming off the ultra, I was like, I'm never fucking doing anything like this again. Like, why in my right mind would I set myself up for something like this again or something even longer? Because man, these get longer, guys. Like there are 100-mile races, which is basically double what I ran. There's 200-mile races. Like these get crazy. Like I'm still a small fish in this world, and I don't know if I'm gonna remain in this world. But coming off this DMT experience, for the first time, I had the sensation that I'm like, maybe, just maybe, I might want to do another ultra. And man, that feeling kind of hurt, because it was like I didn't want to do another one. I was like, I suffered. I went through the most physically harrowing thing I have ever done. I'm like, why would I ever want to do that again? Or why would I want to do something even harder and worse than that? And the trip just brought up all of those emotions in a very intense way. And so I'm really grateful for that. And I think I would have still arrived at those conclusions in like a couple of weeks, but it was like the DMT and the trip really brought that out of me, I think quicker than I expected, in a way that was very pure and gratifying. Like at some point I was sobbing my eyes out, just like letting out all this emotion that I didn't know I had in me. And that felt beautiful. Like that felt cleansing, and I really appreciated that. And honestly, that carries me very nicely into the fifth and final point, which is I would say realization, but really just more like my experiencing through this break from drugs and this ultra and then this like first bender, kind of getting back into it. The fact that I really truly believe that drugs act as a wonderful corollary to your life, but they should never, ever be the main thing. Like your life should be the cake, and the drugs that you take should just be the cherry or the handful of cherries on top of that cake. Like the deeper you get into drugs and the more they take up like brain space in your mind, I think that takes up space that you otherwise could be using for, I think, much more important things, honestly, whether, your relationships, your goals that you have, your career, like whatever is important to you. And there have definitely been times in my life where I admittedly, I think, thought about drugs more than I would have liked to. And, part of it is the fact that I host this podcast, but there have definitely been periods where I'm like, every weekend I was going out, I was doing something, and it was never to the point where I was worried about like, oh, is it an addiction? Or like, I feel like it's having a truly like negative long-term effect on my health. Like I do take a lot of pride in being, as responsible as I can with drugs. But looking back on it, those were times when I think drugs occupied a little bit more brain space for myself than I was willing to admit to myself. And now, having taken this break and seeing how good I felt, I was like, wow, there's a lot more to life, and I could have a beautiful, amazing life without drugs. And obviously that's, that speaks to this wonderful life that I really believe that I've built for myself. But at the same time, I am deeply grateful for the profound realizations that drugs have given me, whether it's unearthing some of those old emotions or whether it's giving me a baseline to like really have deeper connections with people or feel things more deeply when it comes to, physical feats or feeling love or sorrow or joy in my life. And, ultimately, I think drugs are tools. Drugs are foils, and they give you a mirror upon which to reflect yourself in a very profound and intense way. And I think what it ultimately comes down to is how you take those learnings and those realizations back into your day-to-day life and how you let them improve yourself, improve yourself personally, improve your worldview, and how you approach the way that you choose to live your life, and hopefully build your dream life around that and around those realizations. So that's about it for today's episode. To recap, the 5 things that I learned was, number 1, it's truly possible to feel the entire array of human emotions while perfectly sober without needing drugs. Number 2, even healthier, quote unquote, drugs like psychedelics will take a toll on your body, and especially in affecting your sleep quality, which I have learned in recent years, like sleep quality is massively important. I mean, if you're not getting good sleep, like it is affecting your life in ways that you probably cannot wrap your head around. Number 3 is that the longer break you give yourself from drugs, like just being stone cold sober, the more enjoyable it'll be when you come back to them, and the more of a fresh frame of mind you'll be able to approach them with. And I think ultimately in a healthier way. Number 4 is that the usage of psychedelics for processing emotions, not just like digging things up from your childhood, but even things that might just be latent in your brain from the last couple of days, last couple of weeks, like pretty recent stuff. And finally, number 5, and honestly, most importantly, is I do truly believe that drugs make a wonderful corollary, act as a wonderful tool to your life, but they should never be your main focus. Let the drugs be the cherries on top that give that nice, 1% variety and flavor to the remaining 99% of your wonderful, beautiful life. I hope you guys got something out of this episode. Hope you're taking something away from it. Whatever stuck out to you most, I'd love to hear it below in the comments and share any similar realizations or thoughts that this awakened for you. And yeah, looking forward to having some conversations with all you amazing souls. You've been listening to Modern Day Hippie. As you exit the portal, we have just one small ask of you. If you learned something new today, had a laugh, or resurfaced a drug story of your own, we want to hear about it. Drop us a comment on YouTube and show us some love on your favorite podcasting platforms. Internet algorithms really dog on us because of the topics that we discuss, so your support goes even further here than you might think. We'll catch you next week.